The Board of Trustees of the Lamar Consolidated Independent School District is called to order at 6:30 p.m. This is a special board meeting being held on August 1st, 2023. We have a quorum with 6 members present. Mr. Hubenek is absent. Please join me in a moment of silence to observe as you feel appropriate. Please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance and the pledge to the Texas flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, Thank you. Please be seated. We will now have board member reports. Trustees, please keep your comments and reports to 1 to 2 minutes. Who wants to start? Ms. Fox? Okay. Mr. Welch?
I will pass.
Okay. Ms. Danziger?
Just that here we go again, starting of school. I was able to go to the Novice Academy last week of the brand newbies, about almost 100 of those that have never taught school before, hitting our district. But then the next day, all the newbies to our district, about 400, I think. And if we go tomorrow night to the roundup, we'll get to meet most of them. And I also want to thank the administration and everyone involved in the back-to-school block party. It was amazing. I was watching families come through, families of workers from our district bringing their kids and grandkids, and everyone had a wonderful time. And there was popcorn everywhere. I don't know if they're still cleaning popcorn off the floors at Lamar High School, but outside and inside, it was a wonderful, wonderful morning, and congratulations to everybody involved.
No.
Seltzel? Okay. Dr. Nivens, do you have a superintendent report?
Yes, ma'am. I just want to thank the team for the back-to-school block party, the leadership retreat, and all the things we've had going on this summer. We've had numerous trainings this summer. We spent a lot of time, and so I just want to say thank you to the team for spending their summer break, getting us ready for school to start in a couple of weeks.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Johnson, are there any public participation comments? Okay. At this time, we will take action on the consent agenda. Are there any items that the board would like to pull? Okay. May I have a motion to approve the current consent agenda?
I'll make the motion.
Okay, Mr. Lambert makes a motion. Do I have a second? Okay, Ms. Hotzel seconds. Any discussion? Okay, now call for the vote. All in favor of approving the current consent agenda, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No, and the motion carries. Okay. Let's see, at this time, we'll take action on the action items.
All right, trustees, we'll have Ms. Jill Ludwig, our CFO, come up. And she's combining several items this evening, and so it's, budget season. And so, Ms. Ludwig, you got the floor.
Trustees and Dr. Nivens. Tonight, I will be covering in one presentation, as he mentioned, items 7A through C and 9A through D. All of them have to do with our 2023-24 budget adoption process. Just a review first of the budgets that require official adoption by the Board of Trustees. There's 3 of them: the General Fund budget, Debt Service Fund, and the Child Nutrition Fund budget. This evening, we'll be discussing the tax rate and other legal requirements relating to taxpayer notice and then budget and tax rate adoption, as well as a quick review of the main items on the compensation plan. First of all, action items 7A through C are meeting the truth and taxation requirements. Requirement 1 is for the board to vote on a date for the public meeting to discuss and/or adopt the budget and proposed tax rate. That date that we're recommending is the date of the regular meeting also on August the 15th. And then also for the board to vote on the tax rate, or at least be recommended the tax rate that will be published in our notice. And then requirement 3 is the designation of one individual to calculate the no new revenue rate, and then the voter approval tax rate. Starting with the general fund, here's our estimate of revenues for this year as of today. We're looking at $446.944 million in total. About 43% of that comes from local sources. The biggest of the local sources is, of course, property taxes, and the bulk of that is your current year levy. Only 1.6 million of that total of 186.735 million is from prior year delinquent taxes. 56% of the 447 million roughly comes from state sources, with the bulk being our foundation school program, which is roughly 214 million of that. Then the rest, or 3.425 million, comes from federal sources that are reported in the general fund, and that's 3.425 million. And again, the total budget is 446.944 million. I'd like to talk a little bit about tax rate compression. You've probably all heard a lot about that. So the state can provide property tax relief to taxpayers just by decreasing the M&O tax rate in relation to the property value growth that's experienced by each individual school district. There's a mandated formula that's used that produces the maximum compressed rate, which is the starting point for your M&O rate. And on top of the MCR is what we refer to it as, we add the enrichment pennies, and the district has adopted 5 of those. So after Special Session 2, the district's MCR falls within a range that's set in law. There's a floor and a ceiling, which produces the range. And then they calculate the floor. Or the legislature sets the floor, and then the ceiling is 90% of that. Sorry, I think I just said that backwards. They set the ceiling, and then the floor is 90% of the ceiling. The MCR has to be calculated this year using the current $40,000 homestead exemption, which that will actually go to the voters in November. For ratification of a $100,000 homestead exemption. So for the 23-24 calculations, the MCR range began at about 72 cents to about 81 cents. During the session, it dropped to 71.5 to 80 cents. And now, at this point, the TEA has been mandated to reduce that MCR by another 10.7 cents. So the MCR current range is 0.6192 to 0.688 cents. When we do our calculation for Lamar CISD, we actually were below that floor at 0.6085. So what happens is then we're brought back up to the floor, which is the 0.6192. So that's our MCR. You add the 5 cents that I mentioned of enrichment to it, and you get our projected MCR, which is 0.6692. That calculation has been submitted to the state, and the state will then ratify or certify that rate, hopefully by August the 5th. But that's not officially our rate until they certify it. So a couple other things. Additional compression doesn't result in a change in total state and local aid and taxes. It's just a change in who pays what, like whether the state pays it or the local taxpayers pay the share. Hold harmless funding is provided that keeps us from having a significant loss in funding due to an increase in the homestead exemption. So if it goes from 40,000 to 100,000, we don't lose money for that. Just a quick look at the property tax revenue. In previous meetings, we've looked at a preliminary value of $25.423 billion. And you'll see in the left-hand column, that was the calculation of revenue under that scenario. And at this point in time, we have received our certified values, and that's at $100,000 homestead exemption as well. So there's a couple things that have changed. The total value as well as the homestead exemption that's being used in the calculation. So at a 99% collection rate and the 0.6692 M&O rate that I just discussed, that produces current year taxes of $185.135 million. And then you add the delinquent tax levy to that, and our tax revenues are about $186.735 million. Again, here's that calculation again. It shows you how the MCR was developed. As I mentioned, certification happened on July 25th, and the taxable values are up a little bit over 9% over last year's values. Before the $100,000 homestead exemption was calculated in, though, it was a little over 18%. And you'll see that compared to the prior few years, about 24% last year and about 10% the couple years before that. The certified net taxable values are about $25 billion, and after you make the adjustments for the properties still under review and could still be protested, our taxable value for budgeting is right at $25 million, and the current taxes alone are at $185 million for the general fund. Total taxes, including penalty and interest, of $900,000 puts us at total taxes of $187.635 million. On the expenditure side of the house, our total budget this year is $438.074 million, with payroll costs of almost $370 million, professional and contracted costs at $37.6 million, and supplies and materials at $21.4 million. And again, in pie chart form, you'll see that the big chunk is payroll costs and benefits. And when you compare our revenues to our expenditures, we are ahead about $8.9 million. We are looking at earmarking that in October when we bring to you a resolution assigning fund balance, and we would like to take a portion of that and earmark it for future use for opening new schools and the additional costs we're going to have relating to that. This also puts us in a situation where we should have a positive impact on our credit rating as well the next time we are evaluated. A few quick things about the compensation plan, just as a reminder. Our beginning teacher salary will be $62,500. We are providing raises for all returning staff, which incorporate $1,950 and a flat raise for those paid according to the teacher hiring schedule, and 3% of midpoint for all the other staff. Moving on to the debt service fund. The property taxes that are allocated to the debt service fund are $132.8 million, $550,000 in penalties, interest, and delinquent taxes being added to that. We have interest earnings, which are investment earnings on debt service funds, investment earnings on capital project funds, and also capitalized interest, which is produced through the bond sales. That's roughly $7 million. And then we have state hold harmless funding also for debt of $15.2 million. So that gives us $155.5 million in revenues to fund our principal and interest costs and other fees relating to the bonds that are outstanding right now. This fund is a balanced budget. A couple other things I wanted to point out about the debt service fund and the tax rate. In order to fund that budget, we are proposing a 48-cent tax rate compared to a 38.74-cent rate this year. We are proposing an increase in the debt rate for future planning and then debt rate management, of course. We are accommodating a significant increase in principal and interest that's going to be due in 23-24, just for the 2 sales of bonds we've had in this current fiscal year. We also would like to achieve some limited certainty in a period where we have new legislation, and also we are pending voter approval on the homestead exemption. We also would like to save capitalized interest for future bond payments and also for future bond elections. And then also, we have a great opportunity and the potential to maximize savings to taxpayers by defeasing or paying down principal on currently outstanding bonds. So we can pay down a significant amount of bonds due to the call date for some of our 2014 bonds being in February of next year. Relating to the tax rate, the rate that we are proposing to publish is 1.1492, so right at $1.15, which is down from $1.24.
Can you go back and repeat that, please?
We are proposing a rate of $1.15 roughly, and that's down from $1.24. And the M&O rates less as well. Moving on to the Child Nutrition Fund. This is also a self-supporting budget, and we're estimating it to be $26.06 million. The revenues are generated from breakfast and lunch sales and also federal reimbursements. The expenditures are your typical ones for salaries and benefits, food costs, other supplies, and capital equipment. The payroll and benefit costs for child nutrition are estimated at $12.3 million. The next largest category would be supplies and materials at $13.2 million. The total being $26.06 million. So back to the few items we have on the agenda. Under current action, number 7A through C, this evening we'd like for the board to vote on the date for the public meeting, which we're recommending to be August 15th, and then also to discuss the tax rate to be published in the required notice, which is the roughly $1.15 rate that I mentioned. And then also to designate the individual to calculate the no new revenue rate as well as the voter approval tax rate. On the August 15th agenda, we will have four items, which will be the adoption of the 3 official budgets, consideration of the tax rate that will actually be used for this year, also to consider the certified appraisal roll and the new property value for the 2023 tax year, and also to consider accepting the anticipated collection rate for the 23 tax year that's been provided by the tax assessor's office. And you'll see there they expect at least 100% of our taxes, and that includes current and delinquent. That's why it looks funny and it's over 100%. And with that, I can answer any questions you have.
Any questions? Yes, sir.
We're going to collect
$8.9 million more than our budget. And we're going to use portions of that, you said, for opening of future campuses next year because the cost to open a campus is so high.
Yes.
What are we going to do with the rest of that money?
It will, all of it actually will go to fund balance first, and then it's rebudgeted in subsequent years. Having a larger fund balance will actually help us with our credit rating as well, because credit rating agencies look at your underlying rating. And the things that they have been looking at most recently are the level of fund balance and how fast our revenues grow. And so we feel like that will help us as well.
When we were talking to the public in the fall of 2022 about the bond, we told the public that if CAD values rise, I think it was 8 or 9%, we will not have to raise taxes to cover the bond. Was that accurate?
Yes, we said that we would keep a flat tax rate of $1.24. But due to the legislative action in this session, we're able to actually drop the rate in total, as well as increase the debt rate to pay down outstanding debt, which is also a positive.
I think we were going to keep it at $1.24, if I remember right, before the legislature acted. But what we are doing is we are raising the bond debt by 10 cents while we're lowering the M&O.
Right.
So that's not violating what we told the public.
We don't see it as that because our promise was really to keep a flat rate. And we did say that we were going to use compression in order to pay the debt service that was coming up, that we knew was going to increase if we did pass the election and sold bonds. And we did have 2 sales this year as well, due to the speed of the construction projects and stuff.
So we're going to proposing $1.1492 to the public. And what could that be? What would be the absolute lowest that could be if we were going to not have that extra $9 million in it? Would it be a penny or 2 less, or would it be another nickel, or what would it be?
We've modeled it at 44 cents. But we feel like that we need to raise the rate in order to pay the new principal and interest on the bonds that we just sold, and to retain the capitalized interest for future use, because we know we're going to have additional elections.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
What was our tax rate, what increase this year? What was it? We said we needed to be above 8.5%. Did it? The year before it was 30s.
We're at 9, let me go back. We're at a little over 9, I think it was 9.06%.
Okay. So we made it.
There we go.
There
Yeah,
it was. Okay.
9.06.
Well, it's 9%, but, the unforeseen, the unknown is when the legislature decided to give the $100,000 homestead exemption.
Correct.
And
If the
that's
homestead exemption had stayed the same, we'd actually have been at 18.3%.
correct,
Because that's what I thought you had said earlier.
yeah.
Thank you. Okay. I have a motion for the board to approve the date for a public meeting to discuss the budget and proposed tax rate as presented. Ms. Danziger makes the motion. Do I have a second? Mr. Welch makes the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, I call for the vote. All in favor, say aye. 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 Any opposed? None. The motion carries. Okay. Okay, may I have a motion for the board to approve the proposed tax rate that will be published in the notice for public meeting as presented? Mr. Welch makes the motion. Do I have a second? Mr. Lambert makes the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, I call for the vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. May I have a motion for the board to approve the designation of the officer-employee responsible for calculating the no new revenue tax rate and the voter approval tax rate as presented? Ms. Danziger makes the motion. Do I have a second? Ms. Hotzel makes the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, I call for the vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. Okay. Let's see. 7D, consider approval of Lamar CISD 2023-24 Student Code of Conduct.
All right, trustees, I'll call up Dr. Waits.
Good evening, Board of Trustees. Dr. Nivens, Madam President. Tonight's presentation is an action item for the 23-24 Student Code of Conduct. As a reminder, discipline in public schools in the state of Texas is governed by Chapter 37 of the Texas Education Code. From the guidance of Chapter 37, all public schools in the state of Texas establish a student code of conduct and is required to be approved by Board of Trustees annually. The Student Code of Conduct is utilized by campus administrators as a guide for assigning the appropriate discipline for student behavior. The Student Code of Conduct will be published in the LCISD Student Handbook. When Student Code of Conduct is approved, the entire student handbook, including the Student Code of Conduct, can be found online under Students and Parents tabs of lcisd.org. Furthermore, on the screen is a review process for the Student Code of Conduct. The current Student Code of Conduct is reviewed by multiple district departments and area superintendents for edits, additions, or clarifications. These edits are then sent to the subcommittee of campus principals for review. The principals can also make recommendations for edits and additions. The principal recommendations are then reviewed again by district departments and area superintendents. The final draft is then sent to the editor to check for spelling, grammar, and formatting of the document. On the screen are the 22-23 discipline codes that are used to determine the student violation and appropriate consequences of various infractions. These are the current discipline codes, and the new recommendations are in red. We are now focusing on the minor offenses and the major offenses. There are no changes to the minor offenses, however. There is one additional major offense for the 23-24 school year, which is in the student code FAI, student found in an unapproved location, which is located in red. On this slide, you can see the comparison of the 22-23 major/discretionary removal offenses to the 23-24 offenses. It also shows the mandatory DAP or discretionary expulsions for the 22-23 school year compared to the 23-24 offenses. These changes made to these categories are moving some offenses from major discretionary to mandatory DAP discretionary expulsion category. As you can see, some are located in red, such as Class C misdemeanor assault of a student, also stealing and theft, and sexual misconduct. The comparison of the 22-23 expellable offenses and the 23-24 expellable offenses is shown here. These changes made to this category are shifting offenses from the major/discretionary to mandatory DAP discretionary expulsion categories. Some changes are in red, such as deadly conduct, and assault of student on campus second offense, and assault of LCISD staff member. The student received in this slide, the student code of conduct and violations are in the penal code. Green indicates Class A misdemeanor, purple shows the Class B misdemeanor, and yellow indicates the violation that could be Class A or B misdemeanors, and blue indicates felony. In red, the student will receive a citation from the LCISD police, and in accordance with the Texas law, the offense is reported to the law enforcement municipality in which the school is located. For instance, some of the changes here are highlighted. Green indicates a misdemeanor, such as assault of student on campus, first offense. And yellow indicates A or B, such as stealing and theft. This is a continuation of the previous charts that indicates the discipline outcomes and includes additional changes highlighted in red, such as required minimum under the mandatory DAP placement or discretionary expulsions, restitution for damage of school property if applicable. Also, expulsion days can range from 30 school days to 173 school days at JJAEP. This section focuses on the misuse of technology and the internet. Consequences can range from compensation to state jail felony if the video is recorded in a private setting. These are the recommendations for the verbiage in the student code of conduct. Here, in the possession of telecommunications, students are required to keep their device in their backpack and can be taken out with their device during lunch. The teacher or the administration can allow devices to be used for instructional purposes. The crossed out section focuses on the time frame, and the recommended section focuses on the setting. This is a continuation of the section, and it's highlighting the change from minor to a major offense, located in red. This slide shows the red inappropriate use of the cell phone, from the first offense to the sixth offense, ranging from parent conference to ALC placement. This section, students cannot be in a location highlighted in red without approval. These are the locations highlighted in red. Also, techniques to use for discipline management indicated in red are the new additions, such as receiving a 0 for cheating due to the use of an unapproved device. These are the recommendations for the parent-guardian standards of conduct. Yes, okay. Oh, next one, got it. All right. Go back. All right, we'll have questions at this time.
Any questions?
I see that throughout, we've added ALCs with the DAEP. That wasn't there before, and is that the discretion of the offense, or is that just giving more flexibility to the person or the people involved with the situation, one or the other?
So most of the infractions have been moved to the category where it's been mandatory, where it doesn't give them discretionary time for the administrator to make the decision.
I think your question is, because AOC is showing up, AOC and DAP are synonymous, that's the same thing.
Okay,
Yes.
but
And so
that's
we're just making it more clear.
more clear, okay, that's what I
Yes.
thought, so I didn't
Okay.
understand why
Yeah,
that was.
they're the same thing.
Okay.
Can you go to the slide where it talks about citations?
Yes.
How many citations, did we give citations last year? And do we know how many or what that, right?
So we do not give citations. Back in 2013, Senate, I believe it was the 83rd legislature, Senate Bill 393 kind of took that away from our police officers. So they write notifications and they submit those to the DA. And then it's up to the DA to determine whether they want to prosecute or not.
Okay, yeah. Because that's basically what I was reading about with the law, and then it says that we will. Is that one of those shall, or we will, or, I mean, if we say we will, that means all of those will get a citation? Like, that's saying, like, legally, we are saying our policy is if you do this. But if the legislature says that we're not allowed to, is that something that we need to amend, or we need to say, okay, how does that?
Yeah, I have new Chief Garcia come to the microphone. So basically, the law about Class C misdemeanors and then A and B misdemeanors as far as citations are written.
When it comes to Class C misdemeanors, right now it's a violation of law for law enforcement in a school-based setting to issue a citation to a student who is 10 years old up to 17 years old. What we can utilize the word citation is we can actually send summons through filing the report to the JP's office, and they will send summons to the family and bring them in. But no, the officer cannot physically issue a citation.
But what about for Class A or Class B?
For Class A or Class B, Class A and Class B misdemeanors are arrestable offenses, which would be remanded to the county jail if they're above 17 or taken to juvenile if they're 10 to 17.
But the law you're talking about does not address Class A and Class B, so you can write a citation on a student for a Class A or Class B misdemeanor.
No, sir. When it comes to citation, a citation only is an offense submitted to the JP court and issued a citation or summons. Out in the municipalities, if you issue the citation, that's a ticket. You issue that citation, it's immediate summons. The citation or summons is issued for the JP if you're 10 to 17. If it's a Class A misdemeanor, it's punishable by arrest, immediate arrest. If we don't have the resource to transport, at that point, it can be filed with the district attorney's office. The district attorney's office at that point issues the summons or citation for them to appear in county or district court, or county court for an A or B.
So does that wording need to change to say we're Class A and Class B on there? Do we need to make it clear in our policy that?
My recommendation would be that a report will be filed with the Lamar Consolidated Police Department, and enforcement action would be dictated by the courts. So that would be requiring a report, in my opinion, looking at that language. If you're saying that the student will receive a citation between 10 and 17, they cannot. A report will be filed, and we'll have to file it with appropriate jurisdictions or courts. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. So so let me make sure I understand this. A 16-year-old does something that would, out in the world, would get a ticket.
Correct.
But you cannot do that on campus.
On a
So
school
you're gonna
campus that's
give-
controlled by the property, yes, sir.
You're going to give something else. What would you refer to it as?
So the report will be filed.
A report will be filed, and it will
report-
be sent to a court, the justice of the peace.
Yes, sir.
The justice of the peace will then summons the student and the family at a time that's appropriate for the JP.
For the JP, yes. As soon as the JP prosecutor reviews the offense, finds probable cause, they'll issue the summons to the family and the offender.
And that's
to be
the
brought.
only remedy we have, or, not remedy, that's the only avenue we have right now to
Address Class C
address this
misdemeanors.
kind of a situation on a Lamar campus.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Now,
Would it-
you have the Class C situation where it's an assault and an individual can be taken into juvenile. However, in Fort Bend County, juvenile detention does not accept Class C misdemeanors. So that would also have to be filed as a report. Out in the world, that could be an arrestable offense taken to another juvenile probation area, but not here in Fort Bend.
Would it be appropriate to put at the officer's discretion?
I strongly encourage that officer discretion is actually followed. Reason being because there are mitigating circumstances that could occur depending on the issue. An officer discretion is extremely important in law enforcement. I'm very, in my personal opinion, through my law enforcement career and developing that, officer discretion is an extremely useful tool when dealing with the general public, including our student body. Reason being because we want to be able to do positive intervention, behavior interventions, and sometimes law enforcement is not the avenue, and administrators should be able to have that discretion to utilize, their resources to try to rehabilitate that student outside of law enforcement.
Can I just say, I do disagree with you, only in the sense that discretion also introduces other issues. Everybody has different perspectives, everybody has different biases, I mean, we're all human. A lot of things come into play. And really, you know, LCISD police is there to enforce the law. LCISD police is by, you know, Chapter 37 says that LCISD police is not to be involved in discipline in any way. They're there to enforce the law.
Absolutely.
So when we have these things, you know, Class A misdemeanors, Class B felonies, those are happening in our schools.
Yes, ma'am.
In the safety of our schools, these things are happening. And the fact that it's not applied universally every single time, it needs to be, in my opinion, consistent across the board at every school throughout our district, punishable the same way every single time. Because these aren't just small infractions. I mean, Class A and B and felony, those are criminal offenses. You have sexual misconduct in our schools. I mean, people having sex in stairwells and people cheating, people stealing stuff. I mean, you steal a phone, that's worth $600. And these behaviors have just continued and continued because there's not consistent discipline.
Ms. Box, respectfully, I thought we were discussing the citation in Class C misdemeanors.
No, I do agree with you there.
Yeah.
I know, you're right, obviously, that's the law.
Class A and Class B misdemeanors, there's so many different dynamics that play into that. When you're dealing with victims, you cannot deter the victim or prevent a victim from their rights. So a victim that has property that was taken and damaged, that student is a victim. They have a right to prosecute. That is their right. When it comes to that, the Lamar Consolidated could not file charges on the behalf of that student. It's going to be that student and that parent. And for that, we will make sure as the police department that those rights are adhered to. We can't force somebody to be a victim. They have to want to be. They have to want to prosecute and go through the criminal justice process when it comes to it. And a lot of victims, you know, that's their choice. So when it comes to those arrestable offenses, that is definitely something that we will work with the victim. Inside of the school setting, when you talk about these Class A misdemeanors or Class B or felony offenses that occur on the campus concerning district property, then at that point, the board can control however you want to move forward, and you can mandate your principals to become victims and file those criminal complaints. But unfortunately, yes, these things do happen on our campus, but we have to respect the victim rights. If the victim wants to file the charges, we will file those charges without
Okay, so,
question.
for instance, something happens in a classroom or in a hallway, and there are multiple witnesses, multiple people who see it, then who's the victim? Because then you have a classroom, a hallway, a lunchroom, or a locker room, and they're all victims.
So I get what you're saying, but like when you talk specifics about somebody assaults this student in the classroom, that student is the victim. That student's parent and the student have to agree to file a criminal complaint. The school district cannot file that criminal complaint. They cannot be the victim because the harm was caused to that individual. Now, granted, you have other issues that occurred in that classroom, disruption of the learning environment. Those are issues that we can discuss that can be filed separately on the behalf of the school district and sent summons or sent to the JP court to address. But when you have individual offenses that have a specific victim, the school district cannot be the victim in that case.
Chief, could you come up with the circumstances, imaginary circumstances of which the discretion of the officer would come into play that is not a discipline matter, that would be a legal breaking of the law? I mean, what kind of situation are we talking about?
A legal breaking of the law. So as a part of the Lamar Consolidated School District, the board has the right to dictate certain actions that we have as law enforcement. But my officers will go out on a daily basis and travel to and from the campuses. They will encounter certain offenses within their territorial jurisdiction of Lamar Consolidated, such as traffic offenses. An officer can make that stop. An officer can stop and identify that driver. Lamar Consolidated Police Officers has that authority. They can use their discretion and judgment when dealing with that driver to either choose to cite or not to. That's important in some of those circumstances. where the state is the victim, where we are the complainants. Those are limited offenses that we come across.
So in the situation we're talking about, officer discretion, we're not talking about minors in our school system necessarily, because the officers are not getting involved in discipline. We're
Correct.
talking about in the footprint of Lamar.
Right. We have to have a victim. We have to have a victim. We're not going to get involved in discipline. We can't, because we're bound by the law. The Fourth Amendment. An officer touches a student or prohibits a student from moving, that's a detention, and that detention has to be within the Fourth Amendment. It cannot be unreasonable. So we're bound to a higher standard of degree of conduct when we interact with students or any person of the general public. So yes, absolutely, it's not any way, shape, or form. We cannot be involved with discipline we can't enforce policies. We can't enforce school rules. We can't do that.
No, but clearly, the LCISD police policy should be in alignment, with the district, because their purpose is to act in accordance with the district.
Absolutely.
Right.
There's, in essence, we cannot be more lenient than the district policy.
Right.
Just a small example. If the district says that officers, any employee of the district has to do A, B, and C, we have to do A, B, and C. As the chief who creates the policy for the department, I can't say you're only mandated to do A, you can do A, B, C, and D. I can tighten it if there's liabilities that I see and say, no, the district says you can do A, B, and C, but I can tighten it. I can't make it loose.
Let me see if I can give an example and kind of clear up, and bring some clarity to this. 99.9% of these offenses will require a victim of another person, right? You're talking about assault, theft, you talk about those things, right? So what I hear you saying, Chief, is if someone steals from me, then I need to go to LCISD police and say, I want to press charges.
Yes,
If I
sir.
don't do that, you don't press charges.
I don't get involved.
The part where the district will be the victim, I can see, is where a student will go into the classroom and vandalize something, right?
Yes, sir.
Go in the classroom, tear up the computer monitor costs $1,000. At that point in time, the district becomes the victim, okay? So then what you're saying is, at that point in time, the board has discretion to say, in an instance like that, then Chief, we want our LCISD police to file the report.
You're saying that you want your
You want the
principal
district, yes, sir, go
to
ahead.
file the report and be the complainant. And those administrators are now tasked with being the complainant and filing that report with us. Now we have somebody that can file a complaint, because chances are we didn't on-view the offense. We need a witness. So that person filing the complaint would be subpoenaed to court to tell the judge or the jury, this is what I observed.
So this red line down here, the student will receive a citation, does that line put us at odds with LCISD's police policy?
Utilizing the word citation, as it stands right now, it would be in conflict with what the law says.
Right.
The
So-
law says that officers can't, of course, the language, what you could say, a felony, a report will be filed with LCISD Police Department.
So trustees, what we would have to do is amend that language, because the police officers can only file a complaint if there's a complainant.
Yes, sir.
So what we have to do is say, principal now, you will file a complaint if the school system is the victim, right? Because the officer can't, what I'm hearing, officers can't go write a citation without a complaint.
Unless it's an
And you
offensive
can't be
thing,
the complainant.
Yes, sir.
There has to be an employee or someone else that's the complainant. And so what the board will have to be tasked with deciding is, if you want to mandate that, in that instance, student goes to the classroom, they vandalize something, then the board says, okay, Mr. or Mrs. Principal, you will be the complainant. So then you need to go to the police department, file the complaint, and then the police will take on what happens after that.
And so right now, that kind of a directive from us is nowhere in our policy. Is that right?
Correct.
Well, let's do it.
So what happens, let's say, like sex in the stairwell, where you can't, if it's mutual, who's the victim and what happens? Like, what happens?
So you have a sexual offense that occurs on a campus. There's a lot of other legality that goes into place in the prosecutorial side when they talk about, you know, the Romeo and Juliet law, what have you. However, if you have a party who files a complaint as a victim, either one of those parties has to be one of the complainants.
So you could, somebody were to do that in HEB, you would get arrested.
You can, if you want to file public lewdness, the district can file that charge.
Okay.
The principal.
The principal.
The principal, so it all goes back to the principal. So
Principal, another
kids,
victim.
with somebody's having sex in the building,
That's the
They gotta
NLD.
and it's a mutual thing, right? Nobody files a complaint,
They file the, yes.
and they get caught, then the principal can say, I want to file a complaint with,
There you go.
let's say, okay. So we still go back to the principal.
And
Yeah, so I
if,
think
what
we're-
if neither of them want to file a complaint? What if they just want it to
The
go
school
away?
would file, the
They don't
school
want
would
to get
file
in
the
trouble.
complaint.
Yeah, the school, the principal
Okay.
would.
Yeah,
And so that's what the
changes.
board would have to decide, is if they want to mandate the principal do it. When there's not a victim, where there's not a, when the district is the victim and no one wants to come forward in that situation, then the board will have to decide if they want the principal to be the person to file the complaint.
I mean, there might be other
And
ones
that'd
on
be a totally
here,
different offense.
and there might be other ones on here that fall into that same category.
Could be.
But again, I think that might be beneficial to have a policy committee meet with the officer, and, because obviously this needs to be changed somewhat, because it wasn't looked over before we just presented it to everyone, so.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, possessing or selling a lookalike drug, that's a felony.
I need a complaint. If the officer on view that, that's an offense against the state.
Right, so the
If
school would file
the
that
full has
complaint.
to- the
Again,
school
so
has
there
to
are,
be-
so
yes.
quite a few of these are,
But the administrator,
right, we can file, as a district, we can file a complaint.
So can we
Yes.
speak to our council to tell us how we should word this? Is that what, Clay? Is that closed session?
Seeing, but I would take out the red altogether. And I'd point out that, you know, when you're talking about, what you've been talking about is just the law enforcement, criminal penalties. Even if there's not a complainant, there's still gonna be school discipline taken. If there's kids having sex in the stairwell, at minimum, that's gonna be disciplined by the school administrators, regardless of whether there's a criminal prosecution or not. I'd also want to point out that I agree with everything that Chief Garcia, everything that Chief Garcia has said tonight about this. And he's right about the use of discretion, just like school administrators, and I know that you want to make it more uniform. You don't want discipline to be happening one way at one campus and a different way at a different campus, and that's a legitimate concern. The deal is, though, is that even administrators are required by law to use discretion in their school discipline. Even for a mandatory consequence, you have to look at mitigating factors before every discipline is imposed. And those mitigating factors are set forth in law. You know, it's their prior disciplinary history, it's whether they're homeless, it's what their intent was. Administrators have to look at all of those mitigating factors before they apply and make a determination. Just like police officers who come across all kind of different scenarios that we can't even lay out right now, they have to have some discretion in how they handle that. So my concern is that we want to keep school discipline and law enforcement distinct. And by law, they can't be doing school discipline.
Absolutely.
So I'm having trouble reading exactly what that says because I've gotten old now, but to the extent that it is indicating that a certain law enforcement activity is going to occur if this behavior is engaged in, I'm not comfortable with that, and I would take that out.
But it doesn't contradict the law. You know, the law states that the board gets to determine what the duties are of the peace officers within the school.
Within the school.
Right, so our
But
policy,
he's
so
the
police policy,
policymaker.
we're the policymakers, and we would align the police policy with the school district policy, not the other way around.
Yeah, but he's a policymaker for all law enforcement, the chief is. And so y'all don't set his policy. Y'all can work with him about how y'all would like to see it, but he is the chief policymaker for law enforcement at the school district.
Okay, well, Texas Education Code 37.081D states that the Board of Trustees of the school district shall determine the law enforcement duties of peace officers, school resource officers, and security personnel. So what I take that to mean is that police policy, right, he knows law enforcement. I don't know law enforcement, but I do know what I see and what I looked up by law, but can I just finish real quick?
Sure.
That if we say these offenses shall be punished in this way, then police policy needs to fall into alignment with LCISD policy.
You can tell the police officers that we want to have a police officer that's at this campus from whatever hours patrolling this place. You can do those kind of things. You can't tell.
That's not policy, though.
You can't tell the law enforcement officer when he needs to arrest somebody or when he's required to arrest somebody. That's got to be within their discretion.
Yeah, but discretion is, well, discretionary. I mean, we set policy, and that policy needs to fall in alignment with board policy. So I'm not saying that I get to dictate everything he does. Obviously, he's an officer. He knows the law, but he also knows that, you know, sex in the stairwell is a Class A misdemeanor or a Class B misdemeanor, and it's public lewdness. And if the school files public lewdness and we say, hey, this is our problem, we need you to come take care of it, they are law enforcers.
Yeah.
All I'm asking them to do, all I'm
Okay,
asking them to do is the
we're
bare
gonna-
minimum.
We're going to go to closed session now.
Well, I'm just asking, I just want to say
I
that
know,
all
but
I'm
he's our
saying is that.
counsel, and we're going to go to closed session.
You have to read the reasons.
Oh, hold tight.
Read the back.
It is 7:26 PM. We're adjourning to closed session pursuant to Texas Government Code 551.071, 551.072, 551.074, and 551.082, the Open Meetings Act, to discuss personnel, land acquisitions, or consultation with our attorney. Okay. We are, oh, okay. We're back in closed session, back in open session. It is now 8:13 PM. And let's see here. Do we have any more discussion? Okay. Do I have a motion?
Yes. I would like to make a motion that we, after our discussion, to approve the code of conduct as presented with an amendment to delete the line at the bottom, the red line, and replace it with the verbiage of violations of the law shall be reported to LCISD police and forwarded to the proper authorities.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second. But this is on the Lamar CISD discipline code chart, just to specify.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'll second that.
Okay, great. Any discussion? No discussion. Hearing none, I call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None, the motion carries. Okay. All right. Let's see. We're now on 7E, consider approval of Lamar CISD Parent Guardian Standards of Conduct.
Dr. Waits.
Good evening, board members, Madam President, Dr. Nivens again. So I'm going to present to you the Parent Guardian Standards of Conduct. Lamar CISD welcomes parents and guardians to be engaged and involved in student academics and activities. Mutually respectful behavior at school campuses and interactions with campus staff is essential, focusing on the following: safety and security, adherence to school policies, respectful communication, appropriate use of technology, appropriate time and place, privacy and confidentiality, conflict resolution, and feedback and suggestions. On this next slide, we're talking about focusing on the prohibitive behaviors and consequences that can lead to a ban from the campus or facility for the remainder of the school year. A ban can last for the remainder of the academic year if received in fall semester, and the remainder of the calendar year if received in the spring semester. Any questions?
Any questions?
Before this was written like this, was this not anywhere where a parent would know that if there was a situation on campus that they could be removed or asked not to come back? I mean, is that not written anywhere?
It is, yes, ma'am, it is written in the athletic section of the handbook on page 84. And it talks about parent code of conduct and spectator code of conduct. So we revamped some of the wording.
But it was only for after-school activities? And
Yeah,
sporting events?
Yes, ma'am.
And never for the, because some of these things have happened on campuses before.
Yes, ma'am.
So what gave those principals that jurisdiction to do some of this?
It was principal discretion, and it has been a situation where we can ban when it comes to circumstances or investigations involved, but it hasn't been printed as a parent code of conduct.
But even so, no matter what, it's still going to be principal's discretion of how they deal with their parents, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
You mean how they deal with the discipline of it, or the enforcement of it, or?
And discretion if it needs to be a situation where the parent needs to be banned from the campus or event.
Any other questions? No.
Criminal trespass is really the only thing we have in our toolbox as far as consequences.
As far as a significant consequence, I mean, you know, the principal can always talk to the parent and say, you know, I won't allow my staff to be spoken to that kind of way. I won't allow you to, I won't tolerate those things. And then I will tell my staff, don't talk to mom or dad without me being present. You know, so they can do those types of things, but a serious consequence, the most thing that, I guess the quickest thing they can do and the most substantial thing they can do is do a criminal trespass.
Okay. Okay. May I have a motion for the board to approve the Lamar CISD Parent Guardian Standards of Conduct as presented? Okay. Ms. Box makes the motion. Do I have a second? Ms. Hotzel makes a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, I call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. And the next item on the agenda is for the information items. So we'll now have a report and presentation on the information items.
All right, we're going to have Ms. Lowitt coming back to talk about our bond sale we just recently completed.
I'm pleased to present the results, or at least the preliminary results of our recent bond sale. This was for Series 2023A. If you'll recall, earlier in the year, we had the first sale of bonds for the 2022 election, and this is the second of potentially three. Just a refresher, the bond election totaled $1.5 billion and was approved by voters on November 8th of 2022. And then in June 20th of 23, the board authorized the sale of the second installment of bonds. We had a negotiated sale, which means the bonds went to market on July 20th. There was a team of 8 underwriters, and the managing firm was Jeffries. And in a negotiated sale, the underwriters placed the bonds with buyers that that basically tell us what terms they might need in order to buy the bonds. And so we negotiate the rates that are most favorable for us and them and the terms of the bonds and things like that. So that's how that works, and we've used that method since 2003, and it's resulted in low rates, favorable maturities, and it actually translates into the best deals for the district. The proceeds of this second sale will be used to finance projects in the district included in the 2022 bond referendum. The par amount of the bonds was $521.73 million. We did achieve a true interest cost, or TIC, of 4.28%. We'll receive almost $540 million for projects, $460 million of which is for projects in Proposition A, and $80 million for Proposition B, which is the CTE Center. If you'll recall, in the first sale, we sold $16.8 million, or all of the bonds authorized in Proposition C. Lastly, the transactions scheduled to close or finalize on August the 17th. And as I mentioned, the true interest cost is 4.28%, which is comparable to the prior sale this year, which was at 4.27%. So we have sold $1.2 billion of the $1.5 billion so far and had favorable results. So with that, I'll answer any questions you have.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.
Okay, and now we'll have presentations on the future action items.
She did those earlier, so so actually we don't have to, we can skip those.
Good.
But just so the trustees know, those would be future action items for next month.
All right. Yeah, so we're done with all that. Are there any items on the future consent item that trustees would like to pull for discussion at the August 15th board meeting?
For the August 15th board meeting?
Yes.
Oh.
Anything? Nope, okay. Okay, we already did closed session. Are there any future agenda items the board would like to add? Nope, we're good. Okay, then the meeting is adjourned. It is 8:23 p.m.